The galaxy had long been ruled by the Federation, an alliance of powerful species who had established peace by imposing their order on the lesser civilizations across countless star systems. Their technology was unmatched, and their unity seemingly unbreakable. They controlled everything from the smallest moon to entire planets. Each species within the Federation had its own strengths, but none were as advanced as the collective power they wielded together. To the Federation, humanity was seen as a curiosity at best and a potential threat at worst. In the grand scheme of things, humans were just a blip in the vast network of civilizations scattered throughout the stars. Humanity was still figuring out how to handle their own conflicts, much less play on the scale of galactic diplomacy. So when they arrived on the remote human colony known as Damaris, the Federation thought nothing of it. They would bring this small colony into the fold in the same way they had so many others, by force. If necessary, the humans were primitive. They would bend or break under the weight of superior technology, and superior numbers, and life would continue as it always had. The Federation's plan was simple and straightforward. The humans would submit quietly to the will of their betters without question. Their world was to be brought into the Federation's sphere of influence. Much like any other, the Federation sent a small force of peacekeepers to oversee the transition. There would be no bloodshed, just compliance and peace. But what the Federation didn't count on was how fiercely the humans would resist. The first signs of trouble came when the alien ships arrived overhead, their sleek forms casting shadows over the landscape. The humans weren't entirely unprepared. A few knew the Federation's reputation and could sense that something was wrong. The colony had been peaceful for generations, but peace under the Federation's rule came at a price, and the humans didn't want to pay it. The moment the peacekeepers made their first moves on the ground, the humans rose up. The resistance didn't start in any grand way. There were no declarations or speeches, no formal leaders at first, just whispers and murmurs in the streets. It started with a few farmers and mechanics who picked up tools and began to fight back against the invaders with whatever they had at hand, primitive weapons. But it was enough for the aliens to understand that things would not go according to plan. The Federation's troops were better armed and better trained, but the humans weren't fighting with tools or weapons. They were fighting with something far more dangerous, something the Federation hadn't accounted for. They were fighting for their home, for their families, for their way of life. And that was something that couldn't be taken lightly. The first battle wasn't a victory, it was more of a warning. The Federation peacekeepers were forced to regroup and rethink their strategy. But in the aftermath of that initial clash, the humans began to organize. They didn't have the resources to match the Federation's might, but they had something else, something they had in abundance. They had ingenuity, they had a fierce will to survive, and they had something that the Federation didn't understand, a deep and unyielding sense of pride in their independence. The humans knew that the Federation wasn't just a threat to their colony. They were a threat to everything they had ever known, everything they had built. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about standing up for what was theirs. And as the humans looked to the horizon, they knew one thing for sure: they wouldn't go down without a fight. They wouldn't be the ones to bend to the Federation, not without making them regret it. The Federation had made a grave mistake underestimating humanity. They had assumed that the humans would crumble under pressure, or that they would simply comply with orders like every other conquered species. But instead, the humans had fought back with an intensity that was shocking to the Federation's peacekeepers. The resistance was not just a scattered group of rebels. It was an organized and determined force that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. The Federation commanders on the ground were baffled at the tenacity of the humans. They had expected to walk in and control the situation with minimal effort, but now they were in a war for their lives. The human resistance was everywhere, from the smallest village to the largest city. They were hiding in plain sight, blending in with the civilian population, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. They knew the land better than anyone, and that gave them an edge. The Federation had technology far beyond what the humans could dream of, but the humans had something the Federation couldn't predict. The humans had the advantage of knowing their world. Every corner, every alley, every hideout was an opportunity to turn the tide of the battle. The Federation was growing frustrated. Their peacekeepers had superior firepower, but the humans were masters of tactics. They knew how to make every shot count, every ambush a nightmare for their enemies. With each successful engagement, the resistance grew in number and strength. More humans join the cause as they saw what was happening to their world, their homes, their families. They knew that surrender wasn't an option, and in the heart of the human resistance, a new leader began to emerge. His name was Jacob, a former military strategist who had once worked as a civilian contractor for the Federation before the invasion. He understood the intricacies of war like few others. He was calm in the face of danger and ruthless. When the situation called for it under his leadership, the resistance began to operate like a finely tuned machine. The first thing Jacob did was unify the various factions of the human resistance. Those who had fought alone or in small groups were now part of something larger, a well-organized and disciplined force. They were no longer fighting in isolation, but as one single unit. Their goal was clear. They would not bend to the Federation. They would not let their homes be taken from them. Their first victory under Jacob's leadership was a turning point. The Federation's peacekeepers had launched an attack on a human-held settlement, expecting an easy victory. But Jacob's forces set a trap. They baited the aliens into a narrow canyon, where they were ambushed from every direction. The Federation soldiers had never experienced anything like it. The humans fought with a savagery that stunned the aliens. Each human soldier was a force unto themselves. They fought not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Their resolve was stronger than any weapon the Federation could bring to bear. In the aftermath of the ambush, the Federation was forced to retreat and regroup. Their confidence shattered for the first time since their arrival on Damaris. The Federation had been forced to admit that the humans were not the easy conquest they had thought them to be. They were a people who would fight for what was theirs with everything they had, and they would not be defeated easily. And so the battle for Damaris raged on, with both sides now aware of just how high the stakes truly were and how far the humans were willing to go to protect their way of life. As the fighting continued, the humans made one thing clear: they would not back down. They would not surrender, not now, not ever. The Federation had underestimated them once, but they would not make that mistake again. As the Resistance's victories began to mount, a new resolve spread across the human colonies. It was no longer just about survival. It was about something greater, something far more important than just one world. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity was not to be ignored, that they had the will and the strength to stand up to anyone who sought to conquer them. And so the humans drew their line in the sand. They marked it as the point where they would not retreat beyond that line. They would fight to the last breath. And anyone who crossed it would learn just how dangerous a cornered human could be. The sacred line became a symbol of defiance. It was a declaration to the Federation and to the galaxy that humans would never bend to anyone again. It was not just a physical boundary, but a spiritual one. The humans would defend their homes, their way of life, their very identity with everything they had. They would make it clear that no matter how many advanced fleets the Federation had, no matter how many soldiers they sent, no one would take what belonged to humanity. And so, with this new sense of purpose, the humans took the fight to the Federation. They no longer waited for the enemy to come to them. They went to the Federation. They struck at supply lines. They sabotaged communication networks. They hit targets they knew the Federation would never expect. These were not the actions of a defeated people. These were the actions of a species who had something to prove to the universe. And every mission brought them closer to their ultimate goal. The Federation was beginning to feel the pressure, but they had yet to fully understand the depth of their mistake. The Federation's command began to realize that they were not dealing with a primitive species. They were dealing with something entirely different. They were dealing with humans, and that meant something entirely new was at play. There was no simple conquest here, no quick victory, no easy way to suppress a people who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. One Federation officer, an elite commander who had led many successful campaigns across the galaxy, began to take notice. He was sent to oversee the human front, but something about the humans intrigued him. They were unlike any species he had ever encountered before in his years of service. He had seen countless rebellions, but never one like this. The humans were resourceful and relentless. They adapted on the fly. They fought with a desperation and passion that made them unpredictable and more dangerous than any army he had ever faced. He had expected to crush their resistance with ease, but instead he found himself locked in a battle of wits with an opponent he had never fully understood. And so as the Federation's forces prepared to strike again, they knew they were entering unfamiliar territory. The humans had drawn a line in the sand, and they were ready to show the Federation exactly why crossing that line was the biggest mistake they could make. The war for Damaris was far from over, and the humans were just getting started. The Federation could no longer ignore the growing threat that humanity posed. The rebellion was no longer a small group of insurgents, but a well-organized military force capable of striking at the heart of the Federation's power. The initial shock of the humans' defiance was beginning to wear off, and the Federation was starting to adapt. But what they couldn't understand was how the humans seemed to be getting stronger with each passing day. Their tactics were evolving, becoming more sophisticated and deadly. Each victory fueled their drive, and with every battle they fought, their numbers swelled as more humans rallied to their cause. The Federation's commanders were baffled. No matter how many soldiers they sent, no matter how many weapons they used, they couldn't crush the human resistance. It wasn't that the Federation was ill-prepared or lacking in strength. They had the technology and the firepower to wipe out entire planets. But what they didn't have was an understanding of what made the humans so resilient. There was no easy way to suppress a species that refused to be broken. Their will was unyielding, and it was becoming clear that the Federation had underestimated the one thing that had always been humanity's greatest strength: their ability to adapt and survive. When faced with impossible odds, the first real test came when the Federation launched a full-scale assault on one of the largest human-held cities. It was meant to be the final blow. The Federation was determined to end the resistance once and for all, and they sent their most elite soldiers to make it happen. The humans had no illusions about the outcome. They knew this battle could be the turning point. The Federation's numbers were overwhelming, and their technology far superior, but the humans had prepared for this moment. They had drawn every possible advantage from their knowledge of the land and their ability to strike from the shadows. The city itself became a weapon in their hands. They turned every building, every street corner into a defensive stronghold. They set traps and ambushes that the Federation's forces couldn't even fathom. The Federation attacked with everything they had, but they couldn't break the human lines. They pushed forward only to find themselves caught in a web of destruction. Every step that they took into the city became more costly, and as the battle raged on, the Federation's confidence began to slip. For the first time since the beginning of the conflict, they weren't in control. It wasn't just that the humans were fighting back, it was that they were winning against the odds. Each moment of resistance was a reminder that the humans weren't going to stop. They weren't going to break. The Federation soldiers began to falter, their ranks thinning as the battle dragged on. The human forces fought like they had nothing to lose, and that was something the Federation couldn't comprehend. No amount of firepower could defeat an enemy that didn't fear death. The final push came when the human commander Jacob made the decision to lead a direct assault on the Federation's command center within the city. It was a bold move, but Jacob knew it was their best chance to turn the tide. The human forces surged forward, pushing the Federation back with a ferocity that stunned the invaders, and in a final climactic battle, the Federation was forced to retreat, their forces shattered and their morale broken. Jacob stood at the heart of the city, watching as the Federation forces flooded into the horizon. The humans had won again, and the message was clear: the Federation was no longer the dominant force they had once been, and the humans were a people to be reckoned with. The retreat of the Federation forces was a victory. The humans would never forget. It was a statement to the galaxy that they were not to be underestimated, but it was also a turning point in the war. The Federation had learned a painful lesson that day. They could no longer rely on their technology and numbers to crush the humans. They would have to adapt and change their approach. But the humans were far from content with merely surviving. They had tasted victory, and now they wanted more. They knew that the Federation would eventually come for them again, and when that time came, they needed to be ready. They began to regroup and reorganize under Jacob's leadership. The resistance became a force unlike any other. They had learned from every engagement, every battle they had fought, and they used that knowledge to perfect their tactics. They were no longer just defending their homes. They were becoming a military powerhouse. Their victories were no longer a series of lucky breaks. They were the result of careful planning and ruthless execution. The human forces now boasted equipment and weaponry captured from the Federation's fallen soldiers, and over time they had reverse-engineered much of the alien technology. Their engineers worked day and night to improve upon it, and create new weapons and devices that could turn the tide even further in their favor. The humans were no longer outmatched in terms of firepower, and that changed everything. They began to push the Federation back across the planet, reclaiming territory that had once been lost to the invaders. It was a brutal campaign, but it was also one that tested the resolve of both sides. With each human victory, the Federation became more desperate and aggressive. Their leadership began to fracture, and infighting spread among the ranks. The commanders were no longer working together, but scrambling to find solutions to this unexpected threat. But the more they pushed, the harder the humans fought. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, the humans would find a way to surprise them. Jacob and his commanders worked tirelessly to keep the pressure on their enemies. They used every trick in the book to keep the Federation off balance. They didn't give the aliens a chance to recover or regroup. The humans struck fast, and they struck hard, and the Federation's attempts to regain control of Damaris only brought more chaos to their forces. The human resistance had become a symbol of rebellion for other colonies that were still under the Federation's heel. Rumors spread throughout the galaxy of the human successes, and soon other systems began to consider whether they too could break free of the Federation's rule. The rebellion that had begun on Damaris was now a beacon for the oppressed, and as the Federation scrambled to hold onto its power, it became clear that their grip on the galaxy was slipping. And it wasn't just the Federation that was beginning to realize the power of the humans. The alien forces on the ground started to show signs of weariness and fear. They no longer saw themselves as invincible. They began to question whether this war was worth the cost. The humans had proven to be more than just a thorn in their side. They had become a genuine threat. And as they fought back harder than ever before, the message was clear: the humans had no intention of stopping. The Federation knew that if they did not take immediate action to squash the human resistance, they risked losing everything: their power, their reputation, and their authority across the galaxy. They had underestimated humanity at every turn, and now they had made a fatal mistake. The humans had not only fought back, but they had turned the tables on the Federation. With every passing day, their influence grew stronger, and soon the message from Damaris was spreading like wildfire. Other colonies under the Federation's control began to stir. Whispers of rebellion began to rise from the shadows. They too wanted freedom. They too saw the human strength and determination, and they believed that they could follow their example. The Federation's leadership panicked. They had to crush this insurgency before it spread any further. They could not allow this spark to ignite a full-scale rebellion across the galaxy, and so the decision was made: the Federation would launch a full-scale assault on Damaris. They would destroy the human resistance once and for all. They would send everything they had to wipe out the rebellion and remind the galaxy who held the true power. But what the Federation failed to realize was that Damaris was no longer just a world. It had become a symbol, a rallying point for every oppressed people in the galaxy. It wasn't just about one colony anymore. It was about something far bigger. The Federation's planned assault would be their greatest mistake, because this time the humans weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future. They were fighting for the freedom of every colony that lived under the Federation's oppressive rule. Jacob and his commanders knew the Federation would come again, and they knew they would come in full force. But they were ready. The human forces had grown not just in strength, but in unity. They had learned to work together like never before. Their strategies were now refined to perfection, their supply lines secure, and their morale higher than ever. The humans were not fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to win. And when the Federation's fleet arrived in orbit around Damaris, they found a world prepared for war. The humans had been waiting for this moment. They had set traps and laid out defensive positions all across the planet. Their forces were spread thin, but they knew how to fight efficiently and intelligently. They did not have the Federation's advanced ships or weapons, but they had something far more important. They had a deep connection to their world, to their people, to their homes. They fought not just as soldiers, but as defenders of everything they held dear. The first wave of Federation troops landed on Damaris, expecting a quick and easy victory. They were met instead with the full force of the human resistance. The fighting was fierce and unrelenting. The Federation soldiers quickly found themselves bogged down by the humans' guerrilla tactics. Their advanced armor and weaponry were ineffective in the narrow streets and dense forests where the humans had set their traps. The Federation's elite forces were caught off guard by the human ingenuity. The humans knew how to use the terrain to their advantage and how to strike with precision at the heart of the Federation's forces. They fought as if they had nothing to lose. And in that moment, the Federation realized just how wrong they were. They had expected to crush the humans like all the others, but the humans had become something they could not easily defeat. This was no longer a war for survival. This was a war for freedom, a war the humans were determined to win at any cost. The battle for Damaris raged on as the Federation found themselves caught in a quagmire. They had not anticipated. Their initial assumptions had been shattered. The humans weren't just fighting back, they were holding their ground, and the more the Federation tried to press the humans, the more resilient the resistance became. Every assault they launched only made the humans more determined to push back harder, and with each victory the rebellion spread to other systems. Whispers of the human resistance had become shouts of defiance, echoed across the galaxy as more and more colonies began to rise up against their Federation overlords. The ripple effect of Damaris was undeniable. Soon entire fleets of Federation warships were being pulled from their various campaigns to try and stamp out the fire that had been lit in the far corners of the galaxy. But it was too late. The rebellion was growing faster than the Federation could react. The humans had learned from their mistakes, adapted to the Federation's tactics, and now they had become a real threat. The Federation's top generals were forced to reevaluate their approach. They no longer saw this as a mere skirmish, but as a full-scale war against a species they had underestimated. They had expected to control humanity, not to be dragged into a war that threatened to topple the entire Federation. And so they called in reinforcements, sending their most powerful fleets to Damaris, prepared to bring the planet to its knees at any cost. The Federation's leaders were not just concerned with the fate of Damaris anymore. They had to eliminate the humans as a threat once and for all. But even with all their power at their disposal, they failed to recognize the true nature of humanity. Their greatest strength was not in their technology or their weapons, but in their ability to never give up, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. And as the Federation's reinforcements descended upon Damaris, the humans fought like never before. They threw everything they had into the battle. They had no choice now. It was either victory or extinction. The Federation forces came in waves. Their warships and ground troops unleashed hell on the surface of Damaris. But the humans fought back with a fury that was unstoppable. They had learned to use every weapon. They had every advantage they could find. They used the terrain to their advantage. They launched surprise attacks from underground bunkers. They'd hijacked Federation equipment and turned it against them. The Federation forces found themselves spread thin as the human resistance attacked from every angle, every corner, every hidden place that was once a peaceful home, now a battlefield. The Federation's superior numbers and firepower were becoming less and less effective as they faced more human ingenuity and resilience. With each passing hour, the Federation began to feel the weight of the struggle. They could no longer win this war by brute force alone. They had underestimated the humans, and now they were paying the price. The more desperate the Federation became, the harder the humans fought. And as the resistance grew more organized and powerful, it became clear to the Federation that they were not just fighting to conquer a planet, they were fighting for their very survival. The humans had drawn a line in the sand, and they were not about to let the Federation cross it without facing the consequences. The fate of Damaris hung in the balance, and with it the future of the galaxy itself. As the battle for Damaris reached its climax, the Federation forces began to realize that they were losing ground at an alarming rate. The humans had fought with an intensity they had never seen before, and their strength had only grown with time. It was no longer just a matter of holding the line. It was a war for freedom, a war for their very survival. The Federation had been certain they could crush humanity and reclaim the galaxy, but now they were on the defensive. The reinforcements they had sent only delayed the inevitable. They had underestimated the resolve of the human spirit, and they had underestimated Jacob and the leadership he had inspired in his people. With each passing day, the Federation's hold on Damaris weakened, and the human resistance grew stronger. They had pushed the invaders back to their own landing zones, and soon the Federation's command structure on the planet began to fall apart. Soldiers and commanders who had once been confident now found themselves questioning the battle they were waging. Even the elite forces who had been so sure of their superiority were beginning to lose faith as they saw the relentless resolve of the humans in their faces. The Federation's commanders knew they had to act fast or risk losing the entire war, but their options were limited. Every move they made was countered by the humans. Every advantage they tried to take was turned against them. Their advanced weaponry and ships seemed less and less effective in the face of human determination. And it was in that moment of desperation that Jacob made his final play. He called upon his commanders to make one last push, a final assault that would push the Federation forces off the planet for good. He knew it would be costly, but he also knew it was their best chance to win the war and free Damaris once and for all. They gathered every soldier, every piece of equipment they had left, and launched a final strike against the Federation's last stronghold on the planet. The Federation's command center was located in a fortified compound, heavily guarded and well protected, but the humans knew the stakes better than anyone. They pushed through every defense with unwavering tenacity. Each human soldier fought with a purpose and a drive that none of the Federation's forces could match. The final assault was brutal, but the humans' will was unbreakable. With every charge, they tore through the Federation's lines with precision and power. They fought not for victory alone, but for their homes, their families, and their future. The Federation's forces tried to mount a defense, but it was futile. The human assault was too strong, too relentless. The humans reached the heart of the Federation command center, and after an intense battle, the invaders were forced to surrender, their forces broken and scattered across the planet. And with that final victory, the humans had achieved what once seemed impossible. They had won. They had driven the Federation from their world and proven to the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The war for Damaris was over, and the message was clear: humanity would never bow to anyone again. They had drawn a line, and the Federation had crossed it. But they had learned that crossing that line had consequences that they would never forget.